Good afternoon and welcome to Locked On NBA Daily. On today's show, did last night's win prove once and for all that the Hawks are better without Trae Young? Meanwhile, the Spurs may have exposed the Knicks' fatal flaw, and Cade Cunningham is building a bulletproof case to end up on MVP ballots.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NBA Daily, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. However you're tuning in on YouTube or on your podcast app, thanks for making us your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg. Today, we're talking about what the Hawks should do about Trae Young and the Knicks' fatal flaw before talking a little bit about the Clippers. We're doing it with the help of one of Locked On's local experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast. He's a senior NBA writer for the Action Network. It's Matt Moore. Matt, Happy New
Year. Happy 2026. Hope 2025 was okay for everyone, and hope 2026 will be better. We're sad that today, unfortunately, Hayes is on assignment today. He's in a prayer circle, hoping that the Bears are not actually the frauds that they are.
If we're talking football, man, I'm feeling good. The Miami Hurricanes beating Ohio State. Very few feelings.
Woo.
The U. Let's go. What a way to start off the new year. We're going to start off today's show in Atlanta, where the Hawks snapped a 7-game losing streak last night on New Year's Eve against the Timberwolves, and a lot of people are pointing to the fact that, coincidence that Trae Young did not play. The Hawks have lost 5 straight games without, or with Trae Young in the lineup, and they have a better record this season without Trae Young than they do with him in the game. So still, though, Locked On Hawks host Brad Rowland has not given up on Trae Young being able to help the Hawks this season.
There's a lot going to be made. I'm sure there already is being made online right now as I'm talking to you about Trae Young not playing and the Hawks winning. I get it. The Hawks have been better this season, and by the record, with Trae off the floor than when he's on the floor. That is indisputable. They have won more games without Trae than they have with him. I still believe the best version of this particular team has Trae playing, not just not playing. And yes, there's a different discussion to be had that I've already had some, and I'll probably have even more about like turning that roster slot and that pay slot into something else in the future. That's a very reasonable argument to make. But for now, I don't think for me, the takeaway today was not like, oh man, the Hawks won without Trae. I know that'll be a takeaway for a lot of people. I totally get why. It's fine. I'm not mad about it. For me, it's Porzingis coming back and looking good.
The always reasonable Brad Rowland, Matt. Do you agree with him? Should we point more towards the fact that they had Onyeka Okongwu and Kristaps Porzingis in the lineup for the first time in a very long time as the reason for last night's win? Or do you think this says more about Trae Young and Atlanta's future?
I just think these things become referendums on players, and that's when everyone digs in and takes their side, right? Because it's like, well, I like Trae Young, and I think Trae Young's a good player, and he doesn't deserve to be slandered and blamed like this. So, no, this is actually not what's happening. Versus, I don't like Trae Young. I've never liked Trae Young as a player. Someone saying that, not me. And then being like, I want to make sure to push the agenda that Trae Young is bad. And I get it. And there are players that I will take that kind of position with. Trae Young's just not one of them. Where I don't know that Trae's a losing player. I really don't. I think Trae Young isocentric basketball is a losing strategy in 2026. I think it worked for one season in 2021, and since then it has not worked. And I do think that if we look around the league, we're seeing these isocentric systems are failing. Like, they're failing everywhere. You've got to be able to move the ball, and you've got to have guys that can contribute, and you need to be able to balance out your defense. One of the most glaring pieces of this is why, like, look, you can watch the games if you want to not use the numbers. If you don't want to be a nerd, that's fine. And you can just watch the games and look at how tough they look. That Hawks team with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and how he's been playing, and honestly, Vit, I think, has been awesome for them. And KP, especially when he's in the lineup, and Jalen, they're this big, tough, physical, athletic team that plays with a lot of what I would say verve. There's just this sense of how tough they are. With Trae, they turn back into like a Trae team. From a numbers perspective, this is the one that kills me, which is with Porzingis on the court without Trae Young this season, they're plus 6.3. They have a 114 defensive rating. That's great. if it was just, you could look at just the Trae without KP numbers and be like, well, he needs KP. Here's the problem. They played only 47 minutes together, and that's not a lot. So you could say like they need time together. But in 47 minutes together, Young and KP together, with how impactful KP has been, and bear in mind, KP is like popping up on all these advanced metrics lists. Like he's like 7th in EPM, right? With Trae and KP, they're minus 11.5 with a 131 defensive rating. They get murdered in these minutes with your most impactful player on the court. And that's where I get to a point where I'm like, it's not Trae is the problem. It's that whatever the solution is for this team, Trae is not it. And that's where I get to, you have something, and I will cop to a short-term kind of thinking here. I think if you have a long-term plan, if you're on a long-term rebuild, like a Thunder, even like a Wizards, you want to be really patient and careful and be like, we can't overreact to these small things. Like we have a long-term plan. The Hawks aren't there. Like they have a pretty big salary. They have rising stars. Like Jalen Johnson is average, putting up triple doubles. And so from that, when you're there, I think you need to kind of be a little bit more pivot heavy, where it's like, we need to go after what works. And what works right now is not Trae Young.
I think you see teams, and we've seen this over the course of history in the NBA, outgrow their star players.
Yeah.
Where they had success and they had good runs and they had memories and they had moments, and these players mean something to that fan base. And then something happens and that team outgrows them. I think about the Warriors outgrowing Monte Ellis and transitioning into the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green stuff. Yeah. You could think about, I mean, that's just one example. And I do wonder if that's sort of what's happening here. And I think you nailed the point, Matt, where this doesn't mean that Trae Young is bad. It just means that the Hawks they don't need to be a Trae Young team anymore. And in fact, they are better without Trae Young. And a lot of that is just taking Trae Young out of the equation to allow Jalen Johnson to grow into this next guy. He is so good, Jalen Johnson. It's to the point where it's worth being like, we kind of need your roommate to move out so that you can have the whole space to yourself. And let's see what you can do here. Yeah. And I do think that maybe the Hawks are moving in that direction, not to mention the defensive stuff, the amount of strain that it puts on everybody on that roster to have to pre-rotate and switch and cover up for Trae Young over and over and over again. It distracts from a lot of the other things that they can do really well. When you take Young off the court, the on-off numbers speak for themselves. He's at the second worst, really the worst, because the other guy is Caleb Houston on this, and he doesn't play. He's got the worst on-off numbers on the team this season. I mean, the strain is real.
Yeah. And I think, so I wrote this thing yesterday on my Substack that talked about kind of the idea of guys transitioning from being the guy on their teams to being number twos. Trae is actually 57th percentile or better on catch and shoot 3 of the last 4 seasons. Like he's actually a pretty good spot up shooter, because that's been my limitation with him, is when you look at him, you're like, you can't have the ball this much if you're going to be a 31% 3-point shooter. But if he's catch and shoot, he's really good. He's not a guy. He's not Steph Curry, who's just like, is going to, like, you can't, no. Quit trying to be Steph Curry with there. If he transitions somewhere, but the problem is, and the response will be, well, why can't he do that with the Hawks? And the answer is mostly, you can't really do that when the team was yours. Like this was Trae's team for 4 years. Like the Hawks were in the Trae Young business since he was drafted. And for 4 years, it was like, this is Trae Young's team. How do we build around Trae? You can't really do that. Like there's always going to kind of be this weird tension of like, and Trae's always, until he goes somewhere else, is always going to kind of be like, I'm the guy around here. Until he gets traded somewhere else where there's somebody else ahead of him. And that's the best situation I really think for him. He's another guy that I honestly, there's this talk about like the Wolves trying to go for Kobe White. And I'm like, I don't know that Kobe White's good enough. I think like, but you go get Trae Young, who it's like, yeah, but isn't Kobe a better defender? Probably. But you have so much defense to cover up for him in Minnesota. He is a phenomenal passer. There's all these ways that this can work out for Trae. But this Hawks team, if you replace him with somebody with size, physicality, who complements Jalen, who complements their other guys, I really think you're going to be in a pretty good position.
Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who plays really well, right, when Trae Young isn't in. It's such a great point, Matt. I don't know how you kind of take that step. It is Trae Young's team. You go in Atlanta, you go to a Hawks game, it's Trae Young jerseys.
Yeah.
there is something to be said about moving him out in order to prop everybody else up and transition into a new era. And they have the proof of concept. Now, does that turn into a Hawks title team? To Brad's point overall, like he does still think the ceiling of this team is one with Trae Young working out. But we've seen this, right? We've seen Trae Young play a little bit more off the ball, set screens, and then he goes back to Trae Young ball. We've seen it for enough years where maybe it is time to maybe take that step back, so to speak, in order to ultimately take that big step forward. But we're going to move on to another game last night, the Spurs beating the Knicks. And in that game, did the Spurs expose the Knicks' fatal flaw? We'll hear from Locked On Knicks after this. Today's episode of Locked On NBA Daily is brought to you by Game Time. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everybody on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets just takes a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and confident. Prices include fees up front, so the total is clear right from the start, and features like zone deals help unlock great seats at even better value. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, that's LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today and get in on the action. Welcome back to Locked On NBA Daily. The best way to support the show is to subscribe on YouTube. We air Mondays to Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's go to New York, where the Knicks lost to the Spurs last night. Gavin Shaw from Locked On Knicks says the Spurs may have exposed a fatal flaw.
The Knicks' perimeter defense and how that is potentially a fatal flaw for this team. I think the good news for the Knicks is like the template that gives them a whole lot of trouble is hyper quick guards that can also shoot from range, which Fox is like doesn't totally hit the shooting part of that. He's still probably the fastest guard in basketball, certainly in that conversation. But this game is just a good reminder that the Knicks, like, it is absolutely something they're gonna have to find a way to address in a trade, because they just don't have the requisite answer on their roster.
Matt, I was told Mikal Bridges was the solution. That's why you traded all the first-round picks. I was told OJ Anunoby was the solution. I was told that you could build a defense in New York around Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns in the middle of your defense. Is perimeter defense New York's fatal flaw? Is that going to be something that could potentially limit them from, we don't even need to talk about winning the NBA Finals, just making the NBA Finals?
It's tough, man, because it's like, look, they've made the conference finals 2 years in a row with Jalen, which I think needs to be said. They made it last year with Karl-Anthony Towns. My problem is, like, I've said this, and this obviously ticks off Knicks fans, and I understand why. That Celtics series was more about whatever the opposite of proof of concept, fail of concept, for where the Celtics were with their three-point volume as anything. They went so far down that rabbit hole that when it came into a series and it was like, yeah, you got a bad shooting variance over 2 games and you had no alternative, you had no way to counter this, they fell apart. They just absolutely fell apart. Now, the Knicks did the thing, right? They closed, and Brunson's clutch ability played a big role in that. Like, they did their thing. They won to get to that conference finals. Tatum doesn't get hurt. They still beat that team and get to the conference finals. But that, to me, that series was more about Boston than New York. And we're seeing the numbers, like, once again, where this really is a Brunson issue. When Towns is not on the floor, their defense, or when Brunson's not on the floor and Towns is, their defense is still good. But when you have Brunson and Cat together, that's when that defense gets really vulnerable. And the big key here is when you build around the wings, right? The idea is, okay, we're going to have Mikal and OG who can guard. If it's a big body, we'll have OG guard him. If it's a small guy, we're going to have Mikal chase on over the screens. Okay. And that's sound. Where this falls apart is so many teams are able to run guard screens that you can always get the switch that you want. Because the only real way to navigate those guard sequences, if you're not running zone, is to basically, you have to switch it, because 2 guards don't understand how to run up to touch at the level hedge. They don't know how to do that. I think they should. Like, that's, to me, is always the answer here, is where I'm like, just blitz him. Like blitz them with Brunson and McHale. And if you get past that, okay, you have rotational defense behind you, and Towns is actually not. Towns might foul them, but Towns can make some plays there too. Like it's okay to make them scramble, but they're so terrified of trying to avoid the scramble that what they do is in guard sequences, they just switch everything. Well, now Brunson is on the guy, which is what you're trying to avoid in the first place. And all you do is you take 2 dribbles and you spread those guys out. So you put OG and McHale as far away from the action as possible. And now you don't have enough rotational wing defenders to compensate. And you've got this downward action. It's like, we got Mitchell Robinson on the interior. That's not the problem. The problem is like, they know how to navigate away from Mitch in snake pick and roll to get to these spots where it's like a floater, it's a runner. It's these shots that are not difficult for them, or they could just beat them downhill. The reality is just like Brunson is going to be a defensive liability, and he's not talked about like Trae Young or like these other guys, but like he is just because he's small. Brunson's effort is totally fine. Like his defensive effort is fine, but like the reality is like you just can't defend with Brunson on the court. There's no real way to compensate for it. There's just not. Like what I just outlined is like what you do is you go get McHale, like you said, you go get McHale and you go OG, but there's these sequences that you can do to negate it.
Right.
Now what you can do is you can have like an elite defender at the 5. So there's nobody for them to pick on in 2-man action. Mm-hmm. But this is the problem with Towns. And so like if we're going to talk about trades, like it's got to like there's a reason that this went from, oh man, the Knicks defense is awesome with Isaiah Hartenstein to, oh man, the defense is terrible with Karl-Anthony Towns. And yet the defense is fine when Brunson's not on the court with Towns. It's not about Towns. It's about Brunson plus Towns is a net negative defensively. It's still great offensively, but it's a net negative defensively. And that's the problem.
And it's not just Brunson, right? I mean, Brunson is a big part because of the minutes, but when it's not Brunson on the court, it's Deuce McBride. It's Tyler Kolek, who's been getting a ton of minutes. Like these guys are not great defenders. And so it's sort of the opposite where you think about teams that can roll out 2 centers, 48 minutes of good rim protection. They have almost the opposite, right? They have 48 minutes of bad perimeter defense all the time. They don't have a guy that comes off the bench and you're like, oh, that guy is actually, pretty good in terms of a perimeter defense. He creates some friction there. No, it's just every time that they put a guard out there. It's why Landry Shamet was so important for them in the playoffs last year. It was weird. So in terms of trades, I don't know who's out there that makes a ton of sense for the Knicks. Like the name that came to mind immediately is Keon Ellis, but it just feels like every fan base wants Keon Ellis. Sacramento could probably get a 1st-round pick for Keon Ellis, the way that fans, like every fan base in the league wants him if they just put it up to a bidding war, I guess.
Again, fundamentally, you're still talking about the same problem, right, which is you're still going to wind up with this issue of having Towns and Brunson together. If you want to solve this problem, you got to move Towns. Like that's it. You just got to move Towns. And again, when you say these type of things, it makes it sound like I think Towns sucks, and I don't. I think Towns is actually underrated and has been really good and has proven himself in playoff environments. But you got to go if you're going to have the core of this is this. If you're going to have Jalen Brunson, you got to have 4 defenders around him. Mm-hmm. You got to have 4+ defenders around Jalen Brunson, or your defense is going to get considerably worse. And that there's no way around it. There's just no way to get around that fact. You have to surround him with 4 defenders. So you're going to have to move Towns for a defensive player.
The Spurs are also unique in this that they could just roll out De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, like these guys who can really punish that. In the Eastern Conference, you think about, okay, Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, that could like Philadelphia could be a problem. When Halliburton is obviously healthy, the Pacers are a problem for them. They have been historically. How many other teams are really a problem? But then again, you run into that point of, okay, let's say we do get out of the East if we're the Knicks. Well, now we're facing the Rockets or the Spurs or the Nuggets with Jamal Murray in that 2-man action, and or the Thunder, right? With all the ways that they can punish. I mean, all the Thunder do is punish those guard things. It's what makes it's kind of Shea's bread and butter there. So, yeah, really, it's a tough spot, I think, for the Knicks. And trades, as we know, for them are not easy. And these guys who are good perimeter defenders, they have a guy like Josh Hart, but, you deal with some spacing problems. And that's the case for a lot of these kinds of guys, too.
Well, and I would look at, the question I think in the playoff environment is, can the other team's offense keep up with them? That is a question, right? Because there's teams that I think have the guards to beat them downhill. I think Miami's like a really good example of this, where it's like Miami is probably going to play them tougher than people would expect, because Tyler and Powell can get downhill on them and attack that defense. The problem is, like, one, the Heat don't run pick and roll ever. And then 2, or enough, they've been doing a little bit more lately, but 2, I just don't know if Miami's offense has enough juice to be able to keep up with what the Knicks are going to score at a baseline. But if you keep looking, look at here's a team to look at. If it's even, Philadelphia 76ers, and it's like, well, if Embiid and blah, 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 forget that. Forget about Embiid and Paul George. If the problem is you have problems with perimeter containment and you're facing Tyrese Maxey and Quentin Grimes with VJ Edgecombe, that's a scary matchup. Because now all of a sudden it's like, wait, we should be killing this team. But it's like, no, the Sixers base defense is just good enough. Like their base defense is good enough to hang with you, and they attack your weakness so much, and you're not getting the rebound advantage because Joel's not even playing well, but Joel's at least grabbing rebounds. These are the type of teams I think you have to really worry about. What I do think is interesting about the Spurs is that they present the same problem to the Knicks that they present in the Western Conference, which is both OKC and Denver are extremely vulnerable to this format. I would have thought, and even coming in the season, I honestly was like, oh, come on. Like, you got Fox and Castle and Harper. Like, one of those guys is not going to get enough minutes, and that's not fair to those guys. Like, you got you've got an over redundancy. No, because they have this thing that very few teams in this league have right now because of Steph Curry, which is like guards that are just fast and athletic and get downhill. And that's a huge advantage, I think, that people have.
They can always have two of them on the court at the same time.
Right? Yes.
It's huge. All right, so I want to move on. I want to talk about Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons. And we talked about the Jokic injury earlier this week and obviously what it means for the Denver Nuggets, but it's going to have a ton of ripple effects, even if he's just out for 4 weeks. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're a couple Clippers skeptics here. I think that's fair to say. Are they doing enough to change our minds? We'll talk about that next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited-time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a bold move before the window closes. The timing's perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Could Cade Cunningham win MVP? We talked about the impact of Nikola Jokic's injury on the Nuggets earlier this week, but Locked On Pistons host Ku Khalil said recently that it could have a big impact on the Pistons' best player.
Could Cade Cunningham win MVP this year? Nikola Jokic, thank God, avoided serious injury. Now, he's still going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, but the reason why I bring that up is that he's probably not going to be eligible. What does he have to do? What does he have to do to actually win MVP? What would actually have to happen for Cade to win MVP? Number one thing is the Pistons have to finish first in the East. Second thing that would have to happen, if he actually were to average 27 and 10, I think that would look a lot better. Like right now, he's averaging 26 and a half and 9.7 assists. I think that's just as good. Like if they said 27 and 10, I think that just rings different. I think that bolsters his case.
Matt, right now, Cade Cunningham is third on FanDuel's MVP odds behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic. The Jokic ripple effects are immense. This is one of them. I do think that you're going to see other guys get on the ballots. If Jokic is not eligible, Giannis is not eligible, we'll see if Luka remains eligible, right? Like that might not be a thing either. What do you think about Cade's chances to win MVP or at least finish in the top 3 on some of these ballots?
Thunder fans are gotta be like Rottweilers right now, just barking and gnashing their teeth at the cages. I mean, I would be livid if I was a Thunder fan hearing this. The Shea not mentioned one time in this setup here. I'll say this: like, I prefer Cade Cunningham's game because Cade's so much better of a passer, and I love passing. I think Cade's a little bit better defender. It's not that Shay's bad. Shay's a plus defender. Like, I would actually say he's probably like a plus defender. I just think Cade's a plus defender. The problem here is just like largely one, volume. Shai is averaging 30 points and he scores 30 every night. It's not 30 because he gets 45 one night and 25 the next. Is 30 points. It is clockwork. That guy goes to work. Last night was via Royce Young of the Thunder. The last night was his 11th 30 points before 30 minutes game before the end of the third.
It's a great stat.
there's no real comp here with the efficiency, because that's the real Cade there is a pathway here where Cade's going to wind up being, and he may never win it because he might get stuck behind Wemby, but like Cade's on a path here where he's going to be a top 5 finisher, I think, for multiple seasons in a row. But this is the real problem. This is what's holding him back. He's 61% at the rim. That's 35th percentile league wide. Sounds good. It's like, oh, you make 6 out of 10 shots. You need to be making like 6.5 to 7 shots out of every 10. And he's only shooting 33% from 3. The efficiency is just not there. The winning is there. The impact is there. And this was always kind of Cade's thing when he was drafted, is like, he's going to be a guy who is a floor general who you can give the ball to, and he's going to make everybody better. And he does. He does. But the MVP is both a team and individual award.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to be able to be both an engine and efficient. And he's an engine, but he's not efficient yet. I think there's a very good chance of him finishing 3rd, maybe 2nd, depending on eligibility. But unless something happens to Shea, the MVP race is over. That's it. This is done. Like, Jokic may be eligible with 65, 66 games, because I think Jokic comes back early. I've said that on record. It doesn't matter, because if Shea plays 80 games and Jokic plays 67, averaging a 30, 12, 11 triple-double on league-leading efficiency, it's still not enough, because it's like Shea played 18 more games or whatever.
Right.
It's just not, you're not comparable. Cade's on a track, but until Cade figures out how to finish at the rim, this is always going to be a limitation, because it's going to keep him below 30 points a game.
First of all, even just being on a ballot is huge. That's something that we look at historically, and I do think that that's on. I think that's definitely on the table for Cade Cunningham this season. The leap that you're talking about him needing to make kind of sounds like the leap that I thought Shea needed to make 3 or 4 years ago. Whereas, like, this guy, is he ever really going to be a top 3 guy? If he needs to kind of work out the passing, get a little bit more efficient with his shooting, try to figure out the shot chart a little bit more, and then he was like, okay, and then he did it all, and then he became the second best player, first best player in the world, wherever you're going to put him. Maybe if Cade learns how to finish and shoot a little bit better, he does take that kind of leap, and he does, win an MVP at some point in his career. I think he's a candidate, a pretty obvious one to end up finishing on ballots. Does he finish over guys like Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell if the Cavs can fix things? Jaylen Brown, what he's doing with Boston, I think those are maybe more of his peers right now. To your point, it's Shea's award to lose here. Last thing here, the Jazz play the Clippers tonight, and according to FanDuel, the Clippers, get this, 12.5-point favorites, despite having one fewer win than the Jazz, who don't stink, right? They're a competitive team. They're not. That's not a walkover win. 12.5-point favorites tonight, Matt. The Clippers. Are you believing in this Clippers turnaround that they're putting together a little bit?
I'll put on my betting analyst hat for just a second. This is mostly about the market doesn't really know how to properly rate the Jazz because they're so inconsistent. Like, they're over. We will notice, like, hey, they played them really tough. Hey, they got to win over this team. We will notice those little things versus the market is just looking at their overall performance. Teams like the Jazz and the Grizzlies are always going to be lower because those kind of teams never get pushed in the market. Not that the Clippers take on a lot of money either. I make the 7 for what it's worth based on in-season numbers, on preseason expectations, where I was very high on the Clippers. I have a 9. Look, I'm a Kawhi Leonard critic. That's what I have staked I have staked position on. Kawhi Leonard is overstated. However, that guy's been absolutely, like, he has been playing like the kind of leader that he needs to be. Mm-hmm. As the results are starting to come along with it. Like, they have started to execute the way that they need to. It may be too late because I'm just like, you're not going to play this well the entire season, but they are doing the thing right now. And I don't really know what is different with them yet. I'll try and pay attention to some stuff to see, but man, I am going to say, like, it's not like we doubted the talent on this team. They should have been better. And if they're going to get the kind of leadership that they're getting from Kawhi Leonard, at least in production right now, I think that changes the equation, and they should be significant favorites over the Jazz.
Do the Clippers think you win the championship in January? Because they always go on their little, oh my God, look at the Clippers kind of run at the end of December in January.
The thing, though, is they're not wrong. Like, from a regular season perspective, if you said you could have if you told me, all right, you were in charge of a team and not GM, just like in charge of their results, and you can pick your team is going to have its best performance in October, November, December, January, February, March, April. Before the playoffs begin. Any regular season month, I would say January. This is the most meaningful month of basketball. Like this is when it's both exhausting, but teams have gotten past their hot streaks. Everybody is who they is. You're no longer dealing with the Bulls being like, hey, maybe we're pretty good. No, they're terrible. They know that. Like everybody's settled in now. This is where like you get a little bit more consistency. And the numbers have kind of borne that out, that if you really want to be a great team, you need to show it in January. The Clippers are doing that. I just think it's too late.
And it's not worked out for them in the past. No, to your point, this is their moment. They're doing the thing. They do this thing once a season. It feels like, oh my God, look at Kawhi. He's on the court. He's playing like the Kawhi Leonard that we know that he can be. And then something else happens. I will never trust the Clippers ever, ever, ever.
I think
have a nice little run. Congrats.
Well, and then like a good way to put this is like they're 11-21. They're 13th in the Western Conference. Are they worse than the Mavericks? No. Are they worse than the Jazz? No. Are they worse than the Blazers? No.
They underperformed for most of the beginning of the season. They are starting to figure things out. They could make the play-in.
I mean, I think they will. Like they're 3 games back of Memphis for the 9. They're 5 games back of the Warriors for the 8. That's probably too far. Like this looks like they get it together enough for them to be the 9 seed, and then we have like a Warriors Clippers old off, like overhyped team battle.
Maybe we were too harsh on them when they told Chris Paul to leave. They did that, and they go on this little run. The chemistry looks better. Maybe we were a little too critical.
I am not there, and will never be there. I will stake my position. If you have a problem with Chris Paul, then you shouldn't be in the basketball business. That's my position on that.
If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Thank you to Matt for your expertise today. Thank you for making Locked On Podcast Network your first listen. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NBA Daily.
Run and hide, hey!